Okay, this is a clip from a stream I did last week. Watch this.
Because Gears is a pretty known quantity. Like, we know what Gears is gonna be, man. It's gonna be the shooty thing with the cover thing.
Yeah, I mean...
the hoorah thing. That's it, you know what I mean?
Now, a few days later, having finished Gears of War 5, or Gears 5 I guess I should call it, I'm here to tell you that I really liked Gears 5, and it's so unexpected because I really felt like Gears of War as a concept, as a franchise, as a brand, was just kind of like tired and dated at this point. Like, I know it still has its fans, but I feel like the Gears franchise has just grown stale over the last few years. It's almost like gaming has moved on from making this style of game the straight up unambiguous hoorah action shooter. COD was carrying that torch for a while, but then it went World War II to give it some like historical depth. Then it dropped its single player entirely because reasons. Now with Modern Warfare, they're doing the whole gritty realism thing, so much so that certain members of the games press are actually calling it for to be censored, which is obviously crazy. I mean, we obviously had Halo 5, but yeah. Halo 5. Meanwhile, if you look at exclusives on the Sony side, they're all action games, but they're that sort of like Sony game, that third person, over the shoulder, emotionally wrought, open world, etc. You know, like the Sony game thing that they're doing. The AAA industry just feels scared to make a game that is so unapologetically actiony, and I think that's why I liked Gears 5 so much. As I was playing through it, it actually reminded me of the sort of feelings I had when I first played Halo 2 back in the day, particularly the opening missions in the city streets. The spectacle of the Scarab was so overwhelming back then, and so many moments in Gears 5 are just as overwhelming today. It made me realize that they just don't make games like this anymore, and to be playing one again after so long without one just felt pretty great. But Gears 5 isn't good only because it's unique in the present landscape, it's good because it's good. It has absolutely stunning visuals, whether you're running it on PC or an Xbox One. It has a meaty 4-act campaign filled with over-the-top action set pieces and truly heartfelt moments of emotional impact. It's really well written with strong, memorable characters, and it's really funny sometimes. Its action is brilliantly delivered with meaningful new mechanics that make combat far more strategic than ever before, and it's actually pretty tough as well, giving a genuine long-term challenge to those who wish to complete the game on higher difficulties. Most impressively, Gears 5 represents a subtle but meaningful evolution for the franchise, embracing a semi-open world structure that gives a strong sense of pacing and breadth to the proceedings. The game doesn't need to be a relentless action stomp all the time now. You decide where to go, you decide what to do, and you decide when to initiate. The result is something that feels contemporary without forsaking what makes Gears, Gears. This isn't a Sony game, this is a Gears of War game, and it's really fucking good. So let's start from the beginning. A lot of people would have checked out from the Gears franchise with number 3 when the Marcus story arc sort of wrapped up and the torch was passed to a new generation, his son JD, and his friends Del and Kate. So you might be asking yourself if you need to play Gears 4 before playing Gears 5, and I'm gonna say yes, you probably should, but it's not the end of the world if you don't. The story does pick up from where the previous game left off with an identical set of characters who spend a lot of time talking about stuff that went down in Gears of War 4. So yeah, that grounding definitely helps if you have the time for it, but if you don't have the time and you just want to jump straight into 5, that's fine too. First up, the game gives you a very handy summation video in the menu that brings you up to speed on the Gears universe, so even if you've never played any of them before, you can find your bearings, as well as a specific video showing a summary of Gears of War 4 and then the major events that went down during that game. Still, you can't get away from the fact that this is very much Gears of War 4, the sequel. The characters are still in the middle of the arcs they were in the previous games, and if you don't like where they took things in terms of narrative, characters, lore, etc., you probably aren't going to enjoy the stuff in Gears 5 either. So what can you expect from the story? Well, first up, stuff like this.
You're nearly there, child. Stop fighting. Something needs. You don't belong with them.
And this.
Listen, James, word of advice. Stop trying to prove yourself. Just do the job.
Dad, I took a necessary risk.
Necessary means you have no other option. That wasn't necessary, and you know it.
And also a splash of this.
Hang on a second, shitstick.
Shitstick? Del, theories?
I don't know.
Maybe a stick made out of shit?
Or a stick used to stir up shit.
Alright, fuck off.
I guess one thing I wasn't really expecting when I started playing 5 was just how well written it would be, particularly when it comes to characters. Each of them have such personality and depth to them, something so relatable and human, and they exude it at every moment so naturally. I think this is best highlighted, funnily enough, by the presence of Marcus, the protagonist from the first 3 games now pushed to the supporting cast. Marcus's voice is how you'd sound if you want to sound like a tough guy, and all his lines of dialogue are like, "I eat pieces of shit like you for breakfast."
You eat pieces of shit for breakfast?
He's old school in a way that Gears used to be old school. He's like the last action hero, and this new cast of characters are anything but that, with their flippant humor, their supportiveness of one another, and their emotional vulnerability. I'm not saying Marcus is bad or outdated, by the way. He typically steals the show whenever he's on screen.
We need an actual target.
If we're selecting targets, shouldn't someone with real military authority be here?
It's Foz, right?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Shut the fuck up, Foz.
I'm just saying that when you see him and you listen to him and you compare that to the rest of the cast, he's the clearest yardstick for how much Gears has changed since he was leading the franchise. I know not everyone is on board with that evolution, so you can decide for yourself if this works for you. For me, I like what they're doing here. The story itself is not awesome. I mean, it's your standard, like, save the world from the bad guy stuff, with a whole lot of family melodrama added into the mix. JD is Marcus's son, and he struggles to live up to the legend status of his father. Kate herself has a direct familial connection to the enemy, so she's constantly torn between her duty and her family. Del is... well, he's kind of just hanging out, but he's a nice guy and he adds some needed levity and support during the more intense moments. And Faz is a complete asshole, but goddamn if he isn't cool.
You realize I'm the ranking officer here, right?
And we'll reinforce Carmine at the town hub.
It's really these interrelationships that carry a huge part of the game for me, to be honest. Whether it's emotional reveals or just idle banter, I just enjoyed watching these characters interact and hang out, the same way I enjoyed listening to my party members chat between themselves in the Dragon Age game. I had to give props to the incredible facial animations and voice acting here. On the faces, like, wow, they're just so good. Like, whatever they're doing for their face stuff, just every other dev buy that technology and use it. It's really super impressive to see it all in action, and given how tense and personal so many of these scenes are, this was a make or break part of the experience, and the developers definitely knocked it out of the park here. Same goes for the voice acting. I think this scene with Kate was probably my favorite.
Alright, okay, I think we got this. Shit! Control! This is Delta! We are in distress! Mayday! 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 No! I can't breathe! Help! Help!
All right now. I got you. No time to talk. Listen, you need to regroup with Marcus. He's holding a line up here.
You can really feel the intensity here, you can feel how it crescendos, you yourself feel the claustrophobia she is experiencing because her performance is so strong. It's not just Kate though, every performance is equally good, just so real and just so real. Like, it's not easy to do that in games, but the cast have done it here. Really awesome work. So, look, you're talking about a 10 to 15 hour campaign. Are you going to walk away thinking that Gears 5 has the best, most memorable story ever? No, you won't. But similar to, again, Halo, they didn't have the best stories either, but there were so many memorable story moments. Heroism, sacrifice, badassery, banter. Gears 5 achieves the same thing, and if you're up for that sort of schlocky, pulpy Star Troopers meets Transformers level storytelling, you are going to enjoy it. Oh yeah, and by the way, did I mention Gears 5 is sort of open world now? If you've been following any of the lead up to Gears 5, you'll have heard that for the first time the game has now embraced a semi-open world structure. Before this, all Gears games had been strictly linear affairs with mission after mission and absolutely no agency to decide where you'll go next. That changes here in Gears 5. There are 4 acts to the game, and in acts 2 and 3 you're plonked onto a big map with complete freedom to choose where you want to go. You're given map markers that will guide you, of course, and these will lead you to areas which serve as traditional missions. So you get on your skiff thing, which is super fun to drive, by the way. You arrive, you clear out that location, which invariably gives you some new coordinates, and you follow those, and so on and so forth. Now, I saw one headline recently that was like, one Gears 5 level is 50 times bigger than the size of a normal Gears level. And that's true, but it's also kind of unhelpful. Like, old Gears levels were just video game levels, linear, curated, full of stuff. The open world spaces in Gears 5 are essentially just like 5 or 6 levels taped together, connected by vast tracts of empty space. Because yeah, there's nothing out there, man. When you think open world, you imagine that the space probably has like stuff going on in it, but it doesn't. There's no trash mob enemies, no collectibles to discover, no enemy ambushes, nothing. It's just empty space. There are specific landmarks within that space that sort of serve as like sub-quests or side missions. So you'll have a main story objective to go across the map, but as you head there, you might chance upon some ruins and your squad will be like, hey, let's go check that out. And when you do, you'll probably meet some NPC with a backstory, and then you'll fight a few waves of enemies, and then boom, you're done. None of the content is particularly memorable, but it's good enough, and I always enjoyed myself when I took the time to explore. So that's how side content works in Gears 5's open world. Based on my description, you might think that this open world is kind of pointless, like a bit of a marketing gimmick, but to be honest, I really liked it. Yes, it could have had more in it. It could have been more populated, more dynamic, more systemic, but this is the first time the Gears franchise has ever done anything like this, and it's a solid first step. You could go further with it in the next game, but it's a good start for now. For me, it really just changes the pace of the game. Gears games have always been so relentless, like getting on a train and the brakes are out and you're just holding on for dear life. Here, I get to pump the brakes whenever I choose by striking out into the world and exploring some of the side content before I get back to the main story. It also provides breathing room for the characters to just shoot the shit. You know how God of War had its like story time boat rides? Well, it's sort of similar here, but instead of stories about the world, these brief interludes give you a chance to enjoy more of the character interactions, which are a huge part of the game's charm.
I keep wondering about something. JD and Settlement 2. You think Marcus knew?
What he did, you mean?
Yeah,
I think he knew. You saw how he reacted.
I did. And it... well, explains a lot, actually.
So overall, don't expect big things from Gears 5's open world. It's a good but not great showing, and the franchise is still very much defined by what happens in the missions rather than what transpires in the open world. I think there are 3 pillars on which Gears is built. Number 1, over-the-top family melodrama. Number 2, some pretty next-level action set pieces. And number 3, awesome third-person combat. Let's talk about number 2 and 3 on that list. So if you choose to pick up Gears 5 for the single-player stuff, you're really picking it up to experience moments like these.
Hey! Whoa, it's us! We,
Brought company.
get down!
The game is just chock full of the most crazy, ridiculous, over-the-top action set pieces you can imagine. Just when you think that there's nowhere left for the game to go, you'll find yourself standing on top of a rocket which is about to take off while a giant sand kraken is wrapping itself around said rocket trying to bring it down. I think this sort of comes back to the angsty point about there not being many games like this anymore. Spider-Man and God of War certainly had moments like these, plenty of them in fact, but it just feels nice to be holding a gun and surrounded by your squad while this is all going down. It just feels like a comfy pair of jeans that you rediscover after a few years of them hiding in your closet. You're gonna play Gears 5 and be like, oh yeah, I remember when games used to be like this. And it would be nostalgia, but for how fresh it all feels. Because when you combine the stunning visuals, the sound design, the mocap, the music, the destructibility of the environments, and dozens of tiny little details, you can't help but crack a smile at how impressive it all is. It's like Michael Bay, right? Transformers fucking sucks now, but damn it if that dude doesn't know how to put together an awesome action sequence. Luckily though, Gears 5 doesn't suck. core to Gears 5 is the same excellent third-person combat we've come to expect from the series. Mechanically, it's very similar to Gears 4 with a host of reused abilities and weapons, but I think it's a case of not fixing what's not broken. You already had a vast array of weaponry, each one of them fulfilling a very specific purpose and doing a great job of it. The Lancer variants will generally be your go-to, but you've got SMGs and shotguns and battle rifles and sniper rifles and grenade launchers and melee weapons and all sorts of stuff. Huge range, all of it great. The suite of enemies you're up against is also really impressive. There's a lot of them, like I don't know, maybe 15-ish, maybe more. There's enough that I lost count of how many enemies there were, and they all combined in really unique ways per mission to bring a different dynamic to each firefight. And I guess this is where I should say that this is a challenging game. Like, I've played it on normal difficulty, and it was not a cakewalk. Very often, I'd find myself overwhelmed as I wasn't focusing down the right targets, wasn't issuing commands to my squad, wasn't positioning properly, wasn't using my weapons correctly. I died a fair amount, and it felt super good to do so because every single encounter felt really fair. I never felt like the game was just throwing bullshit at me to stonewall me. For those who like to complete campaigns at higher and higher difficulties, Gears seems tailor-made for you, as even at the lower difficulties, the game is not pulling any punches. One of the biggest things that's sure to separate good from great players is the new Jack drone, which is really the flagship addition to Gears 5's combat loop. Jack is an adorable robot drone, and he follows you around. Dell seems to have a real soft spot for him.
Punch it!
No! Dave's still out there!
Who gives a shit? He's a robot!
That's not his fault! Gotcha!
Lift off.
During combat, Jack is fitted out with a number of abilities that you can control. He can pulse enemies on the battlefield, for example, something that comes in super handy in a game where you're very often being bum rushed or snuck up on. He can erect a shield in front of you, allowing you to wail on enemies from relative safety. He can turn you invisible for a time, allowing you to flank enemies when you'd otherwise be pinned down. He can even mind control enemies for a time, allowing you to take command of their most powerful units on the field and use them to your advantage. Very satisfying. But Jack's impact is far more prolific than just combat. He also brings an element of Metroidvania to the game as well, as his abilities can be used during exploration to sneak past turrets or survive otherwise deadly effects of environmental damage. Jack also serves as a motivator to explore the world, since the components you'll need to upgrade his parts are scattered throughout the various levels, and the final upgrade for each of his abilities is typically locked behind a specific side quest. If you want to get the absolute most out of Jack, you're going to have to explore every nook and cranny of the world. But that's not all. In co-op, someone can actually play as Jack, and you're just literally like zipping around the battlefield, zapping enemies, picking up ammo and delivering it back to your teammates. And when you mind control an enemy, you can actually control that enemy during that window. Now, I'm sorry, but that's just really fucking cool. Much like the shift to a semi-open world, Jack represents a genuine evolution for the combat model in Gears 5. It's not earth-shatteringly different, but it's definitely different, and I think he brings a lot to the game. It can be a little clunky to use all of his abilities, since you kind of have to switch between them with a tricky button combo, but the biggest barrier is you actually thinking and being creative enough to make use of his kit. That, combined with the awesome difficulty tuning and the rock-solid third-person combat fundamentals, makes for a really, really satisfying package. So we talk story, characters, world, side content, and core gameplay. Let's round things out now by getting into some of the nitty-gritty details. First of all, graphics. Now, I played this game on both PC and Xbox One X. On the X, the game ran beautifully, flawlessly in fact. You're going to see great draw distances, strong texture detail, and a very competent lighting engine that's going to surprise you at times. I won't hesitate to say that this is among the best looking games on the Xbox, and if you're looking to showcase the power of the Xbox One X hardware, then sure, this is certainly the title to do it. On PC, yeah, a few things to talk about. So I was playing a pre-release build that had very clearly not been patched. I was getting some absolutely horrendous graphical glitches throughout most of my playthrough. They did apply a patch just as I entered Act 4, which seemed to clean up some of the issues, but not all. I was still getting a lot of texture issues where they'd completely break down and it would look like the world was covered in sprinkles. I wish I could say, yeah, it's all smooth sailing, go for it, but I just can't at this point. Like, this is the product they gave me to review in the review cycle, and that's what I saw. We're really close to launch. I can't confidently say that it's all fixed yet. You will have to check that for yourself. So my advice is to look around on forums, see what people are saying who made the jump on day one. do your due diligence on this, because from what I saw, the PC port was not 100% baked. When the game wasn't encountering these issues, it looked absolutely stunning. Compared to the Xbox version, you're going to see much more texture detail coming through and way more ambient lighting to really fill up spaces and create contrast. The blue glow of your gear, or the flashlight in a dark space, or the sun shining through a gap above, these developers know that they have a very good lighting engine on their hands and they aren't afraid to use it. If you can be confident that you won't run into any compatibility issues with your system, you will not be disappointed with these visuals. For PC, you can expect uncapped frame rates in both gameplay and cinematics, as well as the option to put a maximum and minimum cap in place based on your preferences. There are so many PC config options here, including optional ultra quality texture packs, field of view, motion blur toggle, and a whole bunch more. I was especially impressed by how accessible Gears is for anyone playing with a disability. It offers descriptive subtitles for the hearing impaired, the option to disable camera shake, colorblind mode, a toggle to make QuickTime events easier, a target lock when playing on beginner difficulty, full keyboard remapping and full controller remapping, allowing you to utilize the Xbox adaptive controller if you own one. I know only a small percentage of gamers suffer from a disability, so it's really admirable to see Microsoft and the Coalition invest so many resources here. It really is an example that I hope other developers will look to and emulate in the future. One of the biggest draw cards of the game is of course co-op. Yes, you can play co-op in the campaign online, but you can also play 3-player split screen on console and on PC. What PC game in 2019 has split screen? None, absolutely none. This is amazing and the Coalition should definitely get huge props for this. Now when it comes to the multiplayer side of stuff, I can't really give you much information for 2 reasons. Number 1, I've barely played any of it since the multiplayer test windows where you could test this stuff out were like 3 AM Sydney time, and yeah, it just wasn't possible. Secondly, I'm not a Gears multiplayer guy. I'm not someone that's ever loved Horde mode or the straight up versus mode, so me trying to give you an opinion of it probably won't be that helpful. If you're looking for info on that, I'd go and check out dedicated Gears of War YouTubers and Twitch streamers, since they're going to be able to give you a proper take on whether or not the PvP is the same, or it's better, or it's worse than what we saw in previous Gears games. Despite this, I can tell you that there are 3 multiplayer modes. There's the Horde mode, which we all know about. You survive 50 waves of enemies, and there's all the crazy difficulty options, etc, etc. There's your PvP versus mode, which has 12 maps in it and about 12 different game modes as well. And there's also a new mode called Escape, which is kind of like Horde mode meets Left 4 Dead. You start at a specific location and you need to fight your way out, upping the difficulty and aiming for faster completion times. I played a bit of this at E3. It was okay, it didn't grab me, but it was fine. I think if you're someone that loves Gears and loves Horde mode in particular, you're probably going to enjoy this as well. Microtransactions are a part of the mix because of course they are. The prices are not yet available because we're in the review window, except for one bundle which had a whole bunch of stuff in there, like a dozen weapon skins and a character skin and a whole bunch of other stuff. That was 30 Australian dollars, which is 1/3 the price of the full game, so I would expect this pack to be something like 15 to 20 US dollars. All the microtransactions are specific to the multiplayer side of the game, which is, you know, better than them also affecting single player, I guess. I know my views on this are very often unpopular. I just have a view that, like with Gears, it's a first-party Microsoft property. These are the games that they put out to sell Xboxes. Do we really need microtransactions in these games? Like, imagine if in this section I was like, hey man, all these awesome skins and sprays and markers and all this stuff we usually have to pay for with microtransactions, it's all free here, man. How fucking cool is that? Like, you just earn it. Like, it would be pretty cool if I could say that. That would be a nice way to finish the review, but it's not like that. I get it. I don't think these microtransactions are bad. There's no loot boxes, and you can't buy guns, and they don't affect single player. It's just, it would have been nice to say, hey look, no microtransactions, fuck yeah. Either way, I don't think this is really going to bother most people. It didn't really bother me. It certainly doesn't take away from my overall appreciation of the package, but that's it. That's what microtransactions are, that's how they work, that's what they're like in the game. But anyway, all that aside, let's just put cards on the table. This is a pretty remarkable product in its entirety. You can get it on Xbox or PC, and you can play it on either system once you've bought a copy of it, switching back and forward whenever you like due to cloud save. They put genuine effort into the PC port, and while I've got some problems with the early, access, build, whatever, I'm hopeful that they, iron that all out, and we're left with a pretty good PC port. It's also one of the most accessible games ever for people with a disability, which I think is really commendable. It's a chunky 10 to 15 hour campaign full of incredible moments, so much heart and fantastic gameplay. You can play it co-op, online, or split screen, and both Xbox and PC have split screen, which is mind-blowing. It has a huge multiplayer component with a heap of maps and game modes, and the whole thing just looks gorgeous. Like it's a stunning game to look at. But you know what's really mind-blowing? You can buy this on Steam if you want to. They aren't making it an exclusive to the Xbox store because they're clearly trying to respect player choice. Epic Games bad. And most mind-blowingly of all, you can get all of this for $10 as part of the Xbox Game Pass. You can just get 1 month subscription and then play it for like a week or a few weeks or 4 weeks or whatever, and then just cancel your subscription. You just played one of the year's best exclusives for $10 dues. And that's just nuts. And all of this in aggregate just shows how much fight Xbox are bringing to the next generation of console wars. This is an awesome product. It's a very accessible product. It's a very consumer-friendly product. And if Xbox brings this sort of quality and focus on a more regular basis in the next gen, then we're going to have an honest-to-goodness fight on our hands once more, which is exactly what it should be.